All right, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're coming at or tuning in from here in the country. Welcome to the 7th edition or the August edition of Success Spotlight. So, of course, my name is Nolan Duda. I'm the Client Experience Manager for IdealTraits. And today we have a very special guest. So we have Keith Collins joined with us. He's got 13 and a half years in the insurance industry in total, 3 as an agency producer, 3 as an agency owner, 4 as an agency business consultant, and 3.5 years now as a President's Council district manager. So Keith's district this is the first year eligible for the President's Council Award, which is the top 1% of district managers in the country. And they were not only eligible, but they achieved it. There are 37 agencies across Keith's district. And of course, he works closely with the University of Farmers too as well. So Keith, really appreciate you joining the program, talking about what you've done over your last 13 and a half years in the industry to generate success in hiring. So again, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
I'm humbled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Terrific. So this is an interesting one. I think one of my favorite things about being able to host the session is, of course, getting to meet with guests, some folks that I have really talked to a little bit before, or folks like yourself who we have talked a lot over the last couple of years of how we can, work together to be able to help agents and help your district. So for the folks that have tuned in, Keith is really, second to none when it comes to the support that he looks to provide, not only to his district staff, to his agents, and then also agents outside of his district too as well, and fellow colleagues within Farmers, and I'm sure in some cases maybe even outside of that too as well. So Keith, with the experience that you have and really sitting in multiple different seats within the insurance industry, I'm sure that gives you a unique perspective. But I guess when we talk about recruiting, when you think about when you're recommending to agents and doing it for yourself, when you think about the beginning stages of looking for employees, what is generally the first sign that an agency needs to start looking for staff? What does that look like?
Yeah, when they have a name. So really it's all about surrounding yourself with good people, right? So Nolan, I'm going to ask you a question. Who's your favorite superhero?
Oh man. So I was a big Wolverine fan. So I'll go with that. Yeah.
So big movie collaboration just happened, right? Would you rather watch a movie with just Wolverine, or would you want to see Wolverine Deadpool? Would you want to see the whole X-Men?
Good one. The whole X-Men is those are good movies. Personally, I think that's a good movie trilogy. But I liked the movies with just Wolverine. I think those were good. Yeah.
Right. And what I'm getting at is the best way to think about it is when you're building a team, it's so much better. It's so much more capable, right? So I'm partial to Iron Man, but I love the Avengers because you see the whole capability and the stories and all the different things that go into it. So to equate that to an insurance agency, right? Much more exciting. You got to take into your sales, your marketing, everything that goes into making an insurance agency successful. And if it's just a one-man band, you can only sing so many tunes. So when it comes down to it, that person has to be really thinking about, how do I buy back my time? From the very start, what is the least valuable task in my agency that I can either automate or replicate and get off my plate, so that way I'm much better doing revenue producing activities.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking that's a good way to look at it, right? Because research shows that a lot of the insurance industry, and really just a lot of the business out there, a lot of tasks are beginning to get automated, right? So in terms of what that means for staffing and recruiting, is it's forced businesses to look for an increased level of talent. Does that make sense, right? Because there isn't as many mundane or easy tasks that have now been replaced by automation or other things that are out there. So I guess before we jump into that, I want to go back a little bit. When creating job ads, because I'm sure, again, you've done it in multiple different capacities and are now supporting agents with doing it. With it needing you have to consider search engine optimization. You have to consider overall attractiveness. You have to consider personalization, right? All these different factors that go into creating a job ad to make it something that people actually want to apply to. So what resources, I guess, outside of what IdealTraits offers, are you recommending to agents, or is there anything that you're pointing them to assist them in that process, or how does it work? Especially when you're creating job ads yourself too,
Well, I'd say it all starts with you, right? So I would say when you're looking at a job ad, would you want to apply to that job, right? I use the title insurance sales representative all the time as an example
Sure.
of not the greatest title in the world, right? Because it's not an exciting one. It doesn't really grab a whole bunch of keywords, but we use, say, agent apprentice or something that somebody can relate to, and they get much more traction out of it. And that's where I would say, be creative with it within Indeed and ZipRecruiter's guidelines,
Nice, yeah.
but think about what would make it attractive to that individual. But you're also setting a proper expectation too. There's a balance to it, right? You don't want to put insurance superhero and then they're sitting there, and maybe they are a superhero within the agency, but they're smiling and dialing, right? Set the proper expectations, but have that balance of, okay, this is how we're going to market. Just like you would sell a policy, right? You wouldn't just put a number in front of somebody and go, hey, this is your policy. You usually explain, hey, this is how sewer and drain works. This is how this works. Same with a job ad, but you have a lot less ability to speak it. So you have to make sure it's construed within the first paragraph in that job title.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, right? Because there is a fine line between search engine optimization and creativity, right? Because you do want to get a little bit creative, right? You would definitely want to draw in people's attention. But if you get too far down that line, then not enough people are searching for what you're putting as your title, which can affect your results, right? So yeah, definitely agree in terms of like, definitely need to market it and treat it as a marketing opportunity, because, you know, if it's not attractive or if it doesn't draw attention, people most likely aren't going to apply. So on that same vein, when it comes to posting those job ads, of course, there's a lot of different resources that people can post to now. I mean, the job boards are, of course, incredibly important. Social media is drawing a lot of attention. Local networks and referrals have always been a huge component. So in terms of the job ad, it's become a very competitive marketplace in terms of a lot of jobs are being posted, and there maybe isn't enough applicants to be able to suffice. So in terms of sponsorship, have you guys done any sponsorship, or do you recommend sponsorship to your agents in terms of investing into it? Or do you recommend generally the more organic approach in that sense?
Not allowed to say the word require because they're independent contractors.
Okay,
But
sure.
I strongly recommend, because to be honest with you, when you sponsor through, and I'm getting a little technical here, you guys are an ATS platform. I've just seen so much better performance through IdealTraits when you sponsor it than going even directly to Indeed, right? Let's call it like it is. Most of the traffic is going to come through Indeed. But if I'm sponsoring through IdealTraits, one, I've seen better quality candidates. I don't see what I call the bots, right? So these applications that just come out of left field that you don't know why they applied, you can't reach them. And I don't know if there's any truth to their bots. It's probably just me thinking there is. But when it comes down to it, I've convinced myself, at least, IdealTraits is way better in that sense, because I get a lot less fluff, much more deliverable. And I can tell you my team feels the same way because they let me know when there is fluff in the pipeline.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when those applications come in, whether, through a sponsored job ad or just through an organic one, whichever the agency owner, of course, chooses, are you recommending any sort of path of reach out? Like, is there a specific method? Are you recommending jack of all traits? What exactly are you, I suppose, what are you recommending to your agents to do? What does that look like?
We toyed with a lot of different setups at first, because it was first take everybody. That didn't work. Next piece was like, okay, let's be selective with personality profiles, which I love. We can get into that.
Yeah.
But really what we landed on as our system is make it so they have to meet expectations, right? Because I don't care what company you're with, there's going to be a deadline and there's going to be a goal to hit. And if they can't match those two things, they probably won't be a great fit for a sales organization, right? So it's get your license by a certain time. Maybe it's, hey, sign up for your test date by X date. So you have a clear rhythm and an expectation going forward. And if that person's hitting them, then okay, I have somebody that I can work with in my agency, and you're getting to see the action in real time.
Okay. And then is it the communication that's going out? Is it, are they calling? Are they texting? Are you emailing? I mean, of course, I know we'll talk, a good amount about, your experience of working with your district, but then also too in your independent recruiting that you do for the district. what does it look like? Does it look call, email, text? Is it just call and email? Is it just text? How do you all go about that process?
So I call it CTE so they remember it. So call, text, email, and they really respond well to it. So call, text, email, because it's very easy to analogize it to an internet lead, right? If you let an internet lead out there for a day or two, that thing's gotten stale. 40 people have called it. It's almost old news, right? Same thing with a lot of these job applications. These people are looking. If they've applied, they probably applied a few other places, right? It's very few times that insurance is the belle of the ball. So you got to get in there, be able to say, hey, here's the opportunity that I have. Take a look at it. Let's see if it's the right fit for you. And then have that balance too, because you get to see the resume and the personality profile. Okay, is this a good fit for my agency? And if not, the chances are you're probably going to have to go through a volume of applications to get to your good ones. And that's another reason to sponsor, and another reason self-heartedly to use you guys. Like IdealTraits is a great way to generate those applications.
Yeah, awesome. And that's a lot of good stuff just in that first component, right? Because when it comes to recruiting, creating that job ad is really that first step, because you got to have applications coming in the door, right? So talking about personalizing the job ad, make sure you get creative, but not too creative, right? Sponsor your job ad to be able to invest in that recruiting, get more applications coming in the door. And then, of course, call, email, and text them, CTE, as you mentioned, in order to get those candidates involved in the process and keep them going throughout the steps. So once the candidates have applied, you're communicating with them. Is the assessment, do you have it where the assessment, I assume, is sent out automatically, right? Directly through the system. And then do you wait to contact them until after they complete the assessment, or are you communicating with them as soon as that application comes in the door?
So again, we toyed with many different methods on it. The way we found that we like the most is there'll be a mixture of people, really great candidates that don't take the personality profile, and some of them will just didn't know it was attached to the job, right? And there's others that take it right away. So we cherry pick. We really filter it based on resume first, go to the personality profile. But we found that personality profile is so good because it's the disc profile, right? It's an amazing indicator of what this person is. And I like to take that one section of the 9, it wouldn't be quartiles, but basically the drive under pressure or the motivation under pressure. That tells me so much about that person. If it's 75 and above, figure out a way to talk to that candidate, because that to me is like, I tell my team, hey, take those applications, make sure they get in our rotation somehow.
Yeah. And for those of you listening, what Keith is alluding to, is the motivation and drive category in the performance index. When you look at the assessment completed results in a candidate profile, if you look under pressure for that motivation and drive, he's saying 75 and above. Generally, I think the high version is 60 and above. So take a look at those. Typically, if someone has that, they have that, again, that high motivation and drive that makes them good decision makers, has them taking action, and all those good things. So great. And I'm assuming that that's more of an outbound role, right? Where you're having them do some sales, you're having them, potentially do a protege program or something of the sort in that sense, right?
100%. And we've really found those people take right to it. I always see a pattern too, because I was very familiar with the disc profile before I even used Ideal. So I love that you guys use it. So you'll see high structure routine. And when you see somebody from a completely different industry, right? So we're right next to Mayo in Rochester. So we'll see a lot of nurses and this or that pop up. And you usually know when people from high structure routine applying from different industries, usually there's a shakeup. So I would tell anybody, hey, ask about changes at their workplace or why they're leaving in some aspect, because you'll usually see that. And it's not necessarily a great fit to jump just right into the next thing, because they're going to need a lot of hand holding in that sense.
Yeah, that's some good insight, something to take a look at, because that is true. When someone's leaving their position with high structure and routine, it's generally a telltale sign that something maybe have upset them or changed or whatnot. So that's a good point. And if for the folks too, if you were looking for an assessment training or looking to get in a little bit more information, need some help looking at these results, if you go into your account or just go to our website and chat with our team, if you go under the help tab, they'd be happy to schedule, and you can schedule directly from there in a assessment review or assessment consultation, where they'll be able to help you with all that and give you a little bit more insight on the assessment and take a look at the results. Outside of that, if anyone does have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A tab. We'll go through some audience questions too, as well as the questions that we have prepared for Keith. But once the assessment is complete, Keith, what does the process look like after that? I know you mentioned a little bit about it in terms of keeping them and holding them accountable to, I guess, the next steps in the process. But do you have a tried and true interview process that you go through? What's the next step after they complete the assessment?
After they complete the assessment, we try to get them on the calendar for an interview within a week. Because I found a lot of people make a decision if they're truly either changing careers or making a jump to something. They usually decide within 2 or 3 weeks. So you want to be in that first week of that application. That's huge. So again, treating it like an internet lead. Once they've been interviewed at a district level, we have what's called a rolling 10, which is the number of people in studying. I would encourage it at an agency level too, because only so many people that start studying for you are going to actually get through the studying and go to be insurance agents, right? It's the grim reality of the barrier of entry to our industry is that you have to study, get a license, and then become an insurance agent. So I would tell you, fill up that pipeline. Don't just count on one to make it through, and you're banking everything on that one.
Yeah. So the rolling 10. So explain that a little bit more for folks that maybe that haven't really been in the business of establishing a pipeline when it comes to their recruiting. What does the rolling 10 like? What does it look like for you? What are you trying to accomplish?
Great question. So it's a forecaster for us because essentially what it is the number of people in the last 10 days that have logged into the study material we have. So they log into the study material. We can see X amount of people have done that. We know X amount of people are going to get licensed. And it's usually anywhere between 1 in 4 and 1 in 6, to be honest with you, that convert through the pipeline. And we do, I'd say my team does rather, they do a great job of nurturing the pipeline because they call them every 2 or 3 days to see, hey, how's studying going? We're excited to have you. Can't wait for you to start either with this agency or with us, and depending on what it is, and just really keep them excited about the dream that they have. Because when they go study, the last thing they're thinking about is, wow, I can't wait to be an insurance agent. They're going and looking at, I call it legalese, HO1s, HO2s. They're going, what the heck's going on here, right? And they might be ready to give up at that point because they're like, oh man, is this really insurance at that point? And you have to remind them, no, we call it a whole different thing, homeowners and renters and condos and all that.
Yeah, I gotcha. All right. We have an audience question here from Ryan for you. And I guess this one will be more applicable towards the agency owner perspective. But he asks, how many job applications do you have up at one time? And how long do you keep your job applications up before archiving them? So, of course, the agents that are subscribed to IdealTraits have the ability to post up to 5 different job ads. So I'd assume it's like 2 or 3, but I guess I'll let you share the insight of what you see within the district.
I actually love your guys' system having 5 because it's perfect. And I'm not just saying that, it works out perfectly. So I would tell any agent, if you have a mentorship program or whatever you have, you want to have 5 different job posts, one at your office, and then 1 each direction, north, south, east, and west, to really attract and make sure it's 20 miles outside those parameters. That way it's not violating Indeed's guidelines. You're not cannibalizing your ad. And really what we found, and this shouldn't scare anybody, it should scare people into their wits and not out of their wits, is I would say it takes about 100 applications to get 1 really good appointed candidate within your agency. And so if you can follow that methodology, because I would say about 100 people apply, you'll get 50 on the calendar, 25 will actually show up, 6 will think this is a great thing and I'm going to start studying. And out of that 6, about 1 decides, okay, I'm ready to be an insurance agent with you, and gets licensed. So I don't know if that answers it completely. Hopefully.
I think it does. And it's important too, like a lot of the times, if you do have the job ad posted, you got to be careful too with those guidelines, because if you're posted outside of where your office location is listed, and Indeed or ZipRecruiter takes a look at it and they're like, well, Nolan, you don't have an office there, so why are you posting it, right? So sponsorship is something to consider, and treading lightly with those guidelines, because the last thing you would want to do is get flagged, and then at that point your job ads get restricted, which I know we've talked about that can happen from time to time, Keith, and that is not a pleasant experience, right, for anybody. So tread lightly with those guidelines. And if you're thinking about playing around a little bit, reach out to our team at IdealTraits and talk about sponsorship, and they'll be able to point you in the right direction in terms of getting the most out of those ads too, right? Because that's really what's important. But anything else to touch on there, Keith?
Let me plug your team for a minute, because guys, I've messed around with all different types of algorithms in the ads, and I bounce things off at Jasmine at IdealTraits all the time. I'm like, here's what I'm seeing on the predictor tool. Here's what I'm seeing, this and that. I would highly recommend. They're a free resource once you're paying for IdealTraits. It's almost like having a research team at your fingertips. So, but bug Nolan, bug his team. Heck, you'll be better for it.
Yeah. Yep. We're happy to assist as always too. So Keith, we have another question from Iris Nance. Iris, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. In your opinion, Keith, how long is too long for a person to secure their license before you move on? She says that she has one who has been in study course since May. Would you keep this person in the pipeline? So more of a, I guess, a personal opinion question, but Keith, what are your thoughts?
I like to see property and casualty done within 15 to 30 days, and then life and health done within the first 45. Obviously, there's extenuating stances for everybody.
Yeah.
I hate to be that person, though. Anytime I've seen an excuse, usually there's a second excuse for the next time and a third excuse for the third time. So I would use your own personal judgment. I would say for me, 45 days to get both property and casualty, life, accident, and health is what I've seen. And if you're just getting one or the other, I would say 30 days and is pretty fair for those states that have the hourly requirement too. So we have 40 hours in Minnesota for each. I mean, I budget that out. You look at it, they should be able to knock it out within a month. So yeah, I don't know that I keep that person in the pipeline, but I hope I didn't lose somebody their job right there.
Yeah. And Iris, I'm sure you've already done this, but Keith, it could be fair to say that, maybe reaching out to them, then setting another guy or setting a date and being like, hey, been at this since May. It's time to get this done by the middle of September or whatever that may look like for you, Iris.
Like that reaction. Yeah, if you're about over them, that it's probably time to your energy is much better spent. There's some great people out there. I think one of the biggest myths out there is that hiring is hard. There's a lot of good people that do want to work in your agencies, want to work in districts. So spend the energy on them. You don't need to be nurturing somebody that's taken 3-4 months in licensing.
Yeah, really good point. All right. So Keith, we talked a lot about this. I generally ask these questions each time just because I know that the perspective can be different. So when I guess your agents and yourself are, of course, looking for talent, we've talked a lot about licensing, so I assume you're open to both licensed and unlicensed. Do you have a preference either way?
Yeah, I'm probably the crazy one of the group. I prefer unlicensed because our system's set up for it, right? There's nothing against licensed people. Actually, if they're in our pipeline, it's great because it skips a few steps and makes the whole thing easier. But I would tell any agency there's an abundance of unlicensed people in there that you can teach good habits and start right off the bat. I always joke because we're in a rural area, and I see the next question's kind of on rural. I have a bunch of agents that would ask sometimes like, hey, I want to find a licensed person in my town, and the town would be 5,000 or 10,000. And I'm like, okay, out of this town, how many people are licensed? Yeah. Let's drill down. Out of what criteria would they work for you in that sense that they're not already owning their own or doing whatever? So I would tell anybody, be prepared for unlicensed and develop your system to plug and play into it.
Yeah, that's good advice. And then, I do see Joe Winslow. Joe, thank you for joining us. My area is rural and has a small population. That's a small job talent pool. I've struggled to source and find quality hires, unlike I can get 100 applicants' thoughts, advice. So it sounds as if, Keith, what Joe is looking for is advice on getting in front of more applicants in a more rural market, similar to what you're used to there in Minnesota. So I know we talked a little bit about sponsorship. We've talked now about unlicensed talent. Anything else that's out there to be able to give advice to Joe?
Absolutely. Yeah, Joe, 2 things, because I'm in a rural market as well. I would tell you definitely sponsor. And you don't need to go crazy, right? $50 to $100 will do you in a lot of areas, get you some good applications. I would say also embrace remote. Remote has been a game changer for us because I'm a big follower of RPOA and Jeremy Olson, and I watched his stuff on remote, and it's dialed in, right? Because if you have standards for how they're working remote, it's almost like you're extending yourself to another office. Where I think most people think of it, oh, they're working from a coffee shop or the beach or whatever. Well, no, if you have standards where they have an office, they're not quote unquote babysitting, they have everything that an office would have, they just can't commute. You can extend your pipeline that much more and really get those candidates in there. So and I know it's tough in some aspects, but I would say if you have a VoIP and you can track dials and talk time, man, that will absolutely be a game changer.
I would say that's something that really should be implemented in every office these days, right? Is that ability to monitor production, right, or productivity, if you will, and to be able to hold people accountable, right? Especially if you're considering remote, right? So I think that's great advice. And then you mentioned just remote in that sense too, Keith. So what's your experience with hiring remotely? Are you doing it yourself? Are you working with and recommending it to the agents that are in your district, or what's the conversation like there?
It's case by case basis, right? Because what I don't do is I say to a new agent, hey, let's get remote staff right off the bat. I want to see a group of 3 or 4 before they go and start recruiting remote, because I want to see that they got a good solid foundation in their agency. And then we're recruiting to a Medicare specialist or a life specialist or commercial specialist at that point, or another PNC producer, but they have their system so dialed in and the camaraderie within the office, because you want that remote person to be an extension of that culture and at some point come meet the people in your agency. So you don't want them to be just their one-off, a whole nother agency with a whole nother set of standards, right? I would always think, I think a better way to think of remote is almost an extension office or an extension of your culture, rather than thinking of it as a completely separate thing entirely.
Okay. Well, good point, right? And you got to have the systems and processes in place to be able to make it work, right? That is going to be really the first step. If you don't have that, then it really will be your first knockout. But I guess this will be a little bit of a backtrack, Keith, but we talked a little bit about the interview process, and something that's been really cool throughout the success spotlights that we've done is that each person has a little bit of a different tweak to their process. Drew Hodgson, he takes candidates out to dinner before extending an offer to them. Jason Kilgo, he runs them through a role play scenario where he created a 1-page flyer and he has them read it and then try to sell them a bike, right? And a couple of others that have been mentioned throughout the last 6 sessions. But anything unique that you guys are doing, either at the district or that you're recommending to your agents to put as a part of their interview process, anything unique that stands out that you think that maybe is a little bit outside the box, or is it all pretty much status quo?
Oh, no, I don't know that we do anything status quo, but 2 things come to mind. So I love the restaurant, because we do something similar to that. So at district staff level, we're taking somebody to a bar, restaurant, because I want to see how they treating waiters and waitresses. I want them to, usually when they're in an office setting, it's buttoned up. You're going to get the best version of them. In a laid back setting, usually people let their hair down, if you will, and they kind of are more direct about things. And I love that. I'd rather have that version of them, because that's who I'm usually going to work with, right? The other piece, and I learned this from one of my agents, Josh Arnold, he has an amazing question that's, what do you struggle with, right? Because those STAR responses, you want to break those down. Well, I like to ask them, okay, what makes you most struggle? And people are very honest with you, and you can identify things right away that are going to be impeding on the job, because you'd be surprised how many times I don't want to be on the phones. I don't want to talk to people. And I'm like, at that point, I'm like, have you read the job description? Like, so it's funny that most people will out themselves just saying that if you ask them, what do they most struggle with?
Yeah. Have you taken advantage of the video interview tool at all yet, or no?
I do love it. Yeah, it's a good aspect, because you can see how people dress too. Like I'm probably old fashioned in that sense. I thought everybody, when I started interviewing as an agency owner, would show up in a suit and tie, and that wasn't the case. Jess has a whole book full of horror stories sometimes on when you do Zoom interviews, people take it much more casually. So long story short, the video interviews are great. You guys even have a virtual hiring process too that I tell at an agency level is just smart to take advantage of. But I'd let you talk to that because I'd probably butcher it. So
yeah, I won't say much about the virtual hiring assistant program because I know that's not what we're here for. But what I will say is that there's been 28 hires through that department just this month. So 28 people have been hired through the virtual hiring assistant team. Shout out to Faith, shout out to Shane. If you guys aren't working with them, reach out to us so we can get you set up there so they can add to that list of people that are making hires. But Keith, as a part of that, I know we talked about video interview. And then once you have candidates hired, I know you mentioned RPOA with Jeremy Olson, but what's the training look like after? I'm sure you're doing some in-house training. I'm sure it sounds as if RPOA is a part of that, which if, again, you're listening and you haven't checked out RPOA, go into your account, go into the marketplace and go to preferred partners, I believe it is. You'll be able to see all the information on there on RPOA. But Keith, talk about that training once they're hired, once they've gotten licensed, and once the work starts, what happens next? How do you go about that training?
A lot of our people through our pipeline are going through our protege mentorship program where they're working with an agent. So they have a mentor agent. Really what I ask of the agent is they have some sort of additional sales training. And there's so many good ones out there. I personally, Michael Weaver is an amazing one with Weaver Sales Academy. There's RPOA. There's Vlad Cherchenko. And man, is he killing it. Shout out to him. He's on fire. There's Craig Wiggins coaching. So it's really whichever one you most connect with. I would say use that for your agency because you can't. It's so much easier when you have it formatted, processed, and it's a conveyor belt, right? You don't recreate the wheel and you have the prompts because so many people when they first get out in sales have trouble asking for the sale, have trouble with the intro, right? Because you're about to get hung up on about 20 times in the next hour. That can be intimidating. So generating a conversation and being able to do that, that's huge.
And then I think something that really we've talked about it a little bit, but not as much as maybe we should have on Success Spotlight, which is no one's fault but my own, but is retaining talent, right? Because of course, finding it is a challenge of itself. But I met with several agents last week on not really a webinar, but more of like a marketing group setting, and they talked about how they've been able to get candidates, but then they leave, right? And that could be for a number of different reasons, right? It could be the agency culture wasn't for them, could be the position's not for them. But what do you do that stands out of the box in order to keep good talent within the office, right? Because I know you've got some good ones, Keith.
Well, and they are good ones, and that's one of the best things I do is surround myself with good people, way better than me. So when it comes down to that, I would tell you I learned it from Mark Lee a long time ago, and it was reinforced with Mike Vandermeer out in Michigan. Shout out to both of those guys. When it comes down to it, you got to show them a career pathway, right? Nobody wants to stay static. Like if I went to anybody on the attendees list and said, hey guys, you're going to be the same place in the next 10 years, I think you deflate the balloon pretty heavy, right? But if you tell them, hey, yeah, based on where you are now, and we're going to work and do this and that, and you're going to double your income or triple, okay, there's excitement behind that, right? So it's showing them a pathway, showing it what's in it for them. I think is the most important piece when you're trying to retain an employee. And one thing I personally do, because I'm very guarded about my staff, I want to keep them forever, or I want them to grow into positions where they're most happy, is I ask their personal, financial, and career goals. And we do it every 6 months. We sit down and say, hey, are we making progress towards these? And some of it's buying a house. Some of it is, well, I want to go on a trip to here and there. And seeing them accomplish those things, you're going to get more fulfillment out of it than anything. Trust me, the money will be there if you're helping them accomplish those goals.
Really good. Really good. All right. And then I think this might be a step back, so I'm kind of bouncing all over the place. I'm sorry. But compensation, of course, we talked about attractiveness and personalizing the ad, making sure that you tap into that side of it. But then also, of course, being competitive from a compensation standpoint is important, right? So as you work with agents and are assisting them in the process of adding new people, what does the conversation around compensation look like? Are you doing market research? Are you taking a look at, a couple of different resources or maybe just one? And again, what's that conversation as a whole look like? I'm sure it's case by case depending on the agency and what the position they're hiring for. But, generally, what type of research are you doing? And, what's the most consistent package that you see if you're comfortable with sharing it?
Most definitely. So really when it comes down to it, I know people debate base and commission, all like commission only. I would tell you in today's market, it's much less skewed than it was even a year ago, probably employer employee, because it used to be just employee up here, employer down there. Now it's getting closer to a little bit more 50-50. I would tell you have to have a base plus commission, right? Because I think everybody has a risk tolerance. There's very few that have the risk tolerance to just go all in commission only right off the bat. And even if they do, that risk tolerance might not be based off prior experience. So you want to be careful there too. So it doesn't have to be a huge base. I know a lot of agency owners, cash flow is tight and you have to make sure you get return on investment. So plot it out, sit down with whoever you can, whether it's a mentor agent, a district manager, and bounce the idea off them. Show them, hey, I'm going to pay this much base, I'm going to pay them this much commission, and I'm paying this much in leads. And let's talk about payroll tax too, right? Include all your costs, make it hard bound, and then figure out, okay, this is the production I need to get back out to make this worth it, right? And I think as long as you have a pay plan that generates profit for the agency, and it's going to be sustainable and for somebody to grow within that role, that's the most important piece, right? You want to show them the growth, but you also don't want to have your agency go broke over it.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. All right, cool. Well, Keith, anything else that you feel that you wanted to cover that might have missed?
Yeah, biggest thing I tell any agency owner is know your numbers. So whether it's your sales pipeline, where it's quotes, talk time, dials, sales, all that. And if it's your profit per producer, what you're spending on leads, what you're paying in base, and what profits out there and towards your bonuses. Know your numbers because they will really help you take the emotion out of decisions and really help your agency grow where you're able to help a lot of others.
Really good stuff. And Keith, I want you to brag on yourself a little bit if you're comfortable with doing it. We talked yesterday. We talked yesterday about from 2021, I think it was a couple of years ago, to now, where your team is at from production, and you attribute that to, of course, proper marketing and proper staffing. I want you to talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind, in terms of how you've been able to really change things around over the last couple of years in terms of production.
When I got to the district I'm at, it was very bare bones. It was a lot of salespeople, a lot of work hard. I'm going to just sell as much as I can, and we'll see if I can make a living. And really over time, a lot of them have converted to business owners. They've hired the staff. They started to scale. They put the pieces in place in their agency to replicate, buy back their time, and really work towards building an agency that isn't like hamstringing them. Because I was seeing so many of them go on vacation, and then they'd still have to work on vacation. And like, that's not a life. Like, you have a high paid sales job at that point. And you got into this, most people in any company, I'm guessing you got into it for part of the freedom, part of the high earning potential, but you don't want to be chained to it. So I give these guys so much credit. I did not hire a single one of their staff. I did not train them. I did not sell policy. They went from about 350,000 up to close to $1 million in production this past month over a 3-year span. So like three years ago, they did about 350. This past month, they did close to $1 million. And I'm grateful for them. Like, it just genuinely, like, if I can just give all the gratitude to them, and because they listen, right? I would love to implement. I posted about a plant yesterday. Like, you can't make the plant grow. Like, you can just do the things. It's so true. These guys are out there doing the work, deserve all the credit. I get to call myself a PCDM and a topper DM, but at the end of the day, I think that every company's got to remember nobody makes $1 until an agent sells a policy.
Oof, that's deep at the end. And yeah, again, thank you for doing that, because I knew that you were going to be hesitant to do so. But again, that change and increase in production from just a couple of years ago, from when you took over the district to where you guys are at now. Kudos to you, Keith, on your success. And I know, the agents, of course, are a huge part of that too as well. So what you guys have done, everything that we've talked about today, I think this is fair to say that everyone can do literally today. Like
Mhm.
what Keith has mapped out, what he talked about generating success with, it's not unattainable for anyone, right? Like invest into your job ad, call, text, email the candidates as quick as you can, keep them engaged to the process, interview them, keep them going, and don't leave them hanging for too long, and treat everything, in terms of engagement, like it's marketing, right? Like it's a lead from a lead vendor. And then additionally too, as well, have a thorough process that works for you. Make sure that you hold the candidates accountable to the deadlines and what you're looking for them to do. So again, Keith, I think what you shared is a blueprint towards what everyone can start doing today, because again, nothing is unreachable. Nothing is like unrealistic, I guess is the word that I'm looking for. So I really appreciate you coming on, giving this advice and giving this roadmap, so then folks can really start investing into their recruiting and start seeing some hires. So we talked about a lot of great stuff on here today. Again, RPOA, we talked about insurance sales labs. Both of those are within the marketplace as preferred partners, but also don't forget about elite agency training with Brian, of course, Brian Scott, former Success Spotlight guest just a little bit ago. So a lot of training that's out there for you. If you have any questions or need some information, reach out to us. But Keith, thank you again for joining and taking time out of your busy schedule, because I know you shared your calendar with me yesterday and it is jam-packed. So I am grateful for you spending the last hour with me, the last 42 or so minutes with our guests, and sharing all the insights. I appreciate it. Anything else that you'd like to share?
I'm grateful for you too, man. I'm grateful. I think you said like 120 people were on this to take time out of their Tuesday. That's wild to me. Just listen to me ramble for an hour and talk to you. So I appreciate everybody asking the questions. Feel free to reach out to me. Whoever you are, like, love to talk to you about recruiting. Like my wife will tell you, I can't shut up about shop most of the time. So
Yeah.
I love to talk it and recruiting and agency marketing, whatever you want.
Yeah. If you know anything about Keith, he is passionate about lending a hand and helping others. So reach out to him if you have any questions. If you joined us late, we'll send out the recording, so make sure you have it. But again, thank you so much for joining us for the 7th edition of Success Spotlight. We'll see you for number 8 in the month of September with Allstate agent Lita Hanking. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon. Appreciate it, Keith. Thank you.